Hello and welcome to episode 130 of Prose. This week, protect a merciful sword, take another look at Heart of Darkness, and see the strings of fate. While you listen, please head over to prosepodcast.com, as it is our one-stop shop for all things prose. From there, you can follow the programs on social media under @prosepodcast across all platforms, and you can also find the small but growing online store. If you are enjoying the show, please click that 5-star review button for Prose wherever you're listening today. It really helps out quite a bit, as do reviews, so consider leaving a review as well. For easiest access to the show, subscribe using whatever podcast app is your favorite. Also from the website, click on the Patreon page and consider supporting the show there. Heaps of gratitude as well as nifty swag comes with that deal. Again, all of this is at prosepodcast.com. Thanks for listening. Let's get to the tales, shall we? This week we have Justice Turned Mercy, Dart of Harkness by first-time guest author Owen Kerner, and Pulling Strings. Enjoy. Justice Turned Mercy, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. Mr. Smythe?
Yes, friends.
Well, Mr. Smythe, I'm just wondering why we have to guard this broken sword. I know broken swords can be important, you know, what with the old King Arthur, Excalibur legends and all, but, you know, I've read Tolkien as well, but this thing seems blunted and pointless. Why in the name is this up here with all the jewels, sir?
Oh, young Ferenz, how wrong you are, lad. The sword is not just any blade. Though she be blunted, she is also named. She has earned her place in immortality. Do you see that bronze placard there? What does it say?
Katana, sir. Katana, the Sword of Mercy. Tristram's sword. Is that important?
By Jove, of course it is, Ferenz. It sits here among the crown jewels that we are sworn to protect with our lives because it is mercy embodied. Ferenz, what happens if the ravens leave the tower?
Well, England shall fall, sir.
Correct. If Katana is stolen, broken, taken away, the royal family shall be cleaved of all mercy, and then the country herself will be sucked dry of it. Tristan himself bore the sword, boy. He won fame and renown all over the ancient world before his ill-fated love with that other famed trollopy princess. This blade brought down the villainous Morholt in its day. Her tip was first broken because of that snake's rock-hard skull, you know. Though she was broken, she continued on, unlike that blackguard Morholt.
Isolde, sir?
What? Oh, yes. Friends, that's the woman. I'm proud you know the tale. We've stopped teaching the old ways and the old tales these days. Too much technology and flashing lights and whizzing noisemakers to distract us anymore.
Sir, if I may say so, this is pretty looking and all, but it's not so royal, the blade. It's far from bejeweled, isn't it? A little bit of running wolf. A little bit of velvet and gold. And then there's the broken tip. I just don't understand. Help me, sir.
Well, my point exactly, boy. Katana can only be understood if and when one seeks to understand her story and to understand the act of mercy itself. Again, she is mercy in the Isles, friends. Her tip is purposely left squared. Her sisters, temporal justice and spiritual justice, have no such kindness. They are keen, They are appointed. They will end a man's life with little to no thought for him. Every man deserves justice, and no man is spared from how harsh that justice is. Be it his sins on this plane or on the plane of the God Almighty, a man will be struck down if he meets justice of any sort. But mercy, child. Mercy can be kind. She can strike, she can even hurt a man, but she'll not kill him. She'll not end him body and soul.
So, katana is meant to be ceremonial like the fancier swords.
Friends, what aren't you understanding, boy? This is mercy. Just like her sisters, our justice come into our lives in two forms. Ogier the Dane, Charlemagne's own warrior wizard, revered katana. Edward the Confessor himself wielded it, choosing mercy over doling out harsher justice in his lifetime, for better or worse for this nation. King Richard lauded her. King John cherished this blade. Queen Eleanor of Provence was sworn in by this sword when she wed our very own Henry III.
But sir, that would mean this blade is thousands of years old. Is that true?
Well, the history books will tell you that mercy has been remade a couple of times, friends. Don't believe them. Even the drivel we have to read to the tourists is false, you know. They would have you believe it was made only 500 years ago. We few in the know can tell you better.
It's really that much older than that fancy gold spoon that's so special?
It really is, friends. The spoon was some pomp dreamt up just in the 14th century to appease the religious fervor of our nation. The royals and peers wanted to hearken back to Nathan the prophet and the anointing he and Zadok did of King Solomon himself.
The man in the Bible?
The man in the Bible. The man in the Torah. The ancient man. So you do know the biblical stories. That's good, my boy. This spoon tradition was the nobility's attempt at reminding we mere mortals that they are appointed directly by God. Anointing is good for that, you know.
Cromwell and his bunch putting into all that mumbo-jumbo, right?
Have some damned respect, boy. Yes, Her Majesty and her progeny are no longer considered semi-divine, but they are our spiritual leaders and have a, well, for lack of a better word, have a mystical connection to England herself. I tell you again, should the ravens leave, England falls. Should Cortana leave, England becomes a dark place of harshness and death. Should her sister blades leave, the land will be ruled by the unscrupulous, and injustice shall be the new law of the land. There is a reason why that damnable Cromwell and his bunch didn't destroy all these trinkets, you know. Why do you think they would allow the tools of coronation and anointing to survive? They may hate the monarchs, but they knew the power of these ensorcened objects. There's a secret history here, friends, and you have joined in it, whether knowingly or by accident. It would behoove you to pay it mind.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes, friends.
Well, Mr. Smythe, this all sounds a bit scary, a bit like a threat of sorts.
Young friends, it is no threat. It is a reality. This job comes with benefits, a fun uniform, a good wage, respect from the community. But it also comes with some heavy responsibility. If you wish to walk away from being the protector of mercy and justice and the church and of even the spirit of England herself, do so now. Your innocent question opened the door, my boy. You may walk away from it or you may walk through it, but you must do so. Now.
I choose to walk through, Mr. Smythe. I choose to walk through.
Jolly good, friends! Huzzah! In that case, have you ever wandered at the large golden chest in the back vaults? Down by the cellars with all those wines from the 1st century? Well, do you know why we don't touch it? Well, some very famous oxen stumbled millennia ago, making this big gilt box tilt and rock. This bloke named Uzzah steadied the thing, hoping to help out, innocently enough. You know, he didn't want it to fall and crack. It was God's house in the land, you know. That, though, was a direct violation of God's divine law. So, poor good-meaning Uzzah is struck down by the Lord himself for the slip-up. King David himself was so aghast that he threw the thing into this out-of-the-way residence of some chap named Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, just walking away from the thing. Have you guessed at it, friends, what it is?
Thank you for listening to Justice Turned Mercy, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. Please stick around for our next piece, a short poem riffing off The Heart of Darkness by guest author Owen Kerner. Dart of Harkness by Owen Kerner. He who fights with monsters beware. Horror sleeps further downstream. Way out east we live as we dream, perforated beneath the muck. This gathering of shell-shocked souls is nothing less than suicidal. Keep drifting, killer. Do you have a name anymore? Or are you just another ashen heart? Bullet, strike me, lest I survive this expedition. I shall never live again. I love the smell of trauma in the morning. Napalm in the air, in our lungs, tastes like triumph of the wanton. Satan gives you food, cigarettes, orders to follow. He hand feeds you to his close friend, death. Can you hear me through the blood? I am the fire in the forest, waning in thrillful destruction. They don't know how to cry anymore, forced to waste their lives playing in the mud, forced to celebrate hatred in fatal ignorance. No more right, no more wrong. Pleasure and pain divides us all. He's waiting. He listens to the jungle. He is waiting. He listens to the heart. He is waiting in his desperate land for you. For you. For you to take his pain. Dual prophets of psychosis, Have you found your purpose? Thank you for listening to Dart of Harkness by Owen Kerner. Owen Kerner is a high school student living in New York City. He is a musician, a poet, and a philosopher. And I thank him deeply for allowing me to feature his work on the podcast. Please stick around for our last story this week, Pulling Strings. Up next. Pulling Strings, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. My talents manifested pretty early. My ability to read or begin to understand those talents didn't come full on until my mid-20s, though. Some of my earliest memories were of following what I understood to be spiderwebs. Little diaphanous tendrils that I'd seen my mommy and daddy point to on our hikes through rural Arkansas. The difference was that they couldn't see all the spiderwebs I could. They weren't everywhere, but on occasion, I'd see spiderwebs flailing out from some passerby or church member or grocery store clerk. They generally wiggled and waved in an unseen breeze. I thought they were funny. Looking back, I should have exercised a bit more caution, but I was a child. Those things understood to be spiderwebs were never dangerous, you see, but they were always wriggling toward me. I could feel an ever so slight tug on me when they attached. Those tugs were not enough to set me off my feet or pull me too forcefully, but I could certainly tell when I shrugged away from them and went against them that there was resistance there. I could tell that when I was a child. Now those tugs would stick with me. That is, until they'd snap when I pulled against them and let me go on about my way. My mother and father were avid readers, and they molded me in their likeness. I was hungry, ravenous, voracious for stories and myths and folk tales and fictions and fables. I consumed anything they would allow me to, so I quickly became rather too well read for such a youngling. That is how I began to formulate the what and the why behind those spiderwebs. Oddly enough, it was the Disney version of Pinocchio that resonated with me and made me begin to use my reading as true research. My grandfather bought a copy of the film on VHS for us when I was roughly 9 years old, maybe 10. And there at his house, I had whatever version of an epiphany a 9, maybe 10-year-old can have. If there were strings trying to attach to me, spiderwebs that clung and tugged, then I might be like Pinocchio. There might be someone or something out in the world
trying to make me dance and sing and act the way they or it wanted me to. I did not like the idea of becoming a marionette. Pinocchio, after all, had a rather rough road in that film. From child trafficking to being swallowed by a whale a la Jonah, that did not seem all too grand of an existence, even to a child. From Pinocchio with Grandpa onward then, I paid more attention to those spiderwebs, those puppets' strings. I read everything I could get my hands on. Folktales, myths, and fables were actually the most useful. The knowledge of yesteryear is so often discounted as naught but the imaginings of our ignorant forebears. That is a rather heady mistake for we of the modern age to make day in and day out. Religious texts were a touch less useful, though they provided some additional context. Through all of these rather subjective framings, I came to understand around age 16 that the spiderwebs that I'd seen growing up that had morphed into puppet strings in my mind were actually something far more. I was seeing connections in real time, fate made visible, the infinite possibilities of the world taking what was tangible form, at least to my golden eyes. Even after having come to this large leap of a conclusion, I was wary of it. One does not simply assume one can see the hands of God or the gods or fate or the universe and think that's an immensely sane thing to do. I kept all of my mental gymnastics to myself, of course. And I continued to read and to observe my own abilities in real time, as they happened. I came to notice that some webs were more intricate, some strings thicker and stronger. When I spoke with the checkout girl at Walmart, the strings were almost non-existent. Quite often, there were no strings at all. However, when the strings were more numerous, when they weren't spiderweb-like and almost invisible with their thinness, when they were the thickness of a forefinger, a thumb, a wrist, I began to pay even closer attention. These more significant strings tugged far harder on me. They all but demanded my attention. They would make me stumble a bit if I resisted them. I could break free by all means. However, to pull to the point that the tension allowed was a far greater feat. The more complex the web, the more numerous and substantial the strings then, the more that God or the gods or fate or the universe wanted me to interact with that person to whom I was connected. More often than not, I would stop. I would speak with that person. Though far from scientific, these heavier connections proved to be fruitful, important. The man mowing his lawn that I stopped to help get his mower started ended up being my connection to a rather significant university scholarship. 2 different young women, one a waitress serving me while I was studying for finals my junior year of high school, and another a random person I was passing by in a local video rental store, became first lovers, then significant romantic relationships, and then dear, dear friends. The list was almost infinite. When the tug was more substantial, the connection was more substantial. The strongest cables were with my family. They were well nigh indestructible. My favorite chained connection to someone was my little brother. From the moment he was born, I could see the labyrinth of strings that connected us. Inextricable. I was quite young when he was born, but those webs only became more complex and stronger and thicker with time. The latticework that came to connect us as we aged was unbelievably Byzantine and steeled. In university, I wanted my sporadic reading to take a more deliberate methodological approach. Though majoring in the humanities, I also took several physics courses, focusing specifically on string theory. A bit on the nose, admittedly.
But I thought at the time that the idea of unseen and misunderstood forces in the universe had to be at work. Science would aid me to a better understanding than myth. So, I began to sift my way through the theoretical frameworks that man was doing his best at building in order to understand the infinitely dimensional in the term of one-dimensional strings. I struggle with the idea that mass, charge, particles, and the vibration of the very building blocks of reality itself might be visible to my mundane eyes. Even after 2 years of elective coursework and very, very patient professors, I could quote what precisely string theory was, or at least the generic version of it. The many vibrational states of the string corresponds to the graviton, a quantum mechanical particle that carries gravitational force. Thus, string theory is a theory of quantum gravity. But, let's be honest, I did not truly understand it. Save through the strings that pulled me out in the real world. Books and equations did me no good. I must admit my disappointment and my surprise. But folk tales, myths, and fables were actually still the most useful source material. To my dismay, even the religious tracts of the world did more to explain my talent than all the sciences. I graduated with my various degrees, meaningless in the long run, truth be told. Working and earning money and practicing one's craft is lackluster in the face of such a divine mystery as was my daily existence. As I continued to move through a world that wasn't entirely a surprise to me, I began to rebel against the spiderwebs. The more significant the string or group of strings were, I began to specifically avoid them, pull away from them, sever them as quickly and as brutally as possible. This only consisted of me distancing myself from the person from whom the strings emanated. Quick, efficient, without remorse. For roughly a decade that saw me move from my 20s to my 30s, that was my practice. At which my hypothesis was further concreted in all the most depressing ways. All that severance of faded connections led me to nearly complete isolation. I had no friends. I had no romantic connections. My idea that the meaningful relationships that push and pull one's course in this life are currents one could choose to fight against, avenues one could choose not to take, well, it was right, wasn't it? That is what has taken me full circle into embracing what I did as a young boy. I have begun to follow these spiderwebs again, with wonder and excitement. But in choosing to be led by them once more, I have made a new discovery. Just like I can pull away from a meaningful connection, those that are connected to me can as well. They might feel the tug. They might not. They might feel the fabric of the universe telling them to connect with me. But they too can sever that connection, move against it, and change their fate, our fate, disconnecting with me and moving off to oblivion, never to return. Just last night, I was walking my dog in the local park. As the sun set, dog walkers were everywhere, and I could see the strings dancing in the winter breeze, contentedly enjoying my time outside with my little companion. When we rounded the northeast corner of the park, a woman and her dog crossed our path. Her dog pulled at my dog, but she was clearly leaving. I was ready to move along and finish our circumnavigation of the park before full dark, but my dog pulled at hers again. Even those little beasts had the strings connecting them, though light and thread-like. This young woman and me, however, we might as well had had the transatlantic cable connection for all the world's internet between us. I literally gasped and my stomach lurched. She was on the phone, but she still stopped. Our dogs did their little canine hello routine with sniffs and hops and scrabbles. We smirked at each other. We made heavy eye contact. The strings, the connections vibrated in a way I'd only felt a small number of times in my life. At the birth of my younger brother, at meeting my ex-fiancée for the first time, at my being introduced to the man that would give me the job that would define me for 15 years. This woman and I shared an epic fate, a resonance in all realities. My connection with this stranger was something beyond that, though. It was what a cathedral is to a one-room country church, the Taj Mahal next to a tin-roof shanty. The strings were the thickness of my entire body, and they did not give me the option to resist them. I was stopped dead in my tracks. The vibrations almost toppled me. The pattern of the interweaving of all those bulky strands was something too complex to even be called a spiderweb. She and I were entangled in every way possible. Even all that scientific study noted that two particles can become entangled, almost two fusing as one, in many ways across many realities, if not all realities. We were meant to be here. Now, we could not have avoided it for all the universe. But she looked at me apologetically, knowingly, turned away, pulled her dog, and began back toward the exit to the park and the darkening blocks beyond. She turned back one more time, her pup still fighting to get back to mine, as if it too knew she and I were meant to meet. She met my eyes and I saw it. She did know. She could see the spiderwebs as well. She could see the puppet strings trying to make us dance a duet together that evening. And she tugged. She turned and walked all the more quickly, but not before she mouthed "I'm sorry" at me before she trudged into the night. As the strings severed, I was breathless. In something akin to pain, though it did not hurt acutely. Yet that severing of the strings, it stung. It did, and it continued to sting. I think about it daily, hourly even. Later that night, my dog licked me as if I were wounded. He comforted me in my distress. He acted like I was sick, and maybe I was. Maybe I am. In a world where I'd been so very lonely, I met a one, maybe the one, and she chose to cut that connection and move along with her life. She had seen the strings. She had known we were caught in a web. And she had knowingly fought her way away from me and the life that God or the gods or fate or the universe had had in store for us. In my experience, once a connection was severed, that was it. I'd never felt the same tug from people from whom I walked away. More often than not, I never even saw them after slicing our connective strings. So my seeing this girl again was less than likely. My maintaining any sort of connection with her was all but impossible. Rather than accept my own hard-won logic, though, I began to read again. I retreated back into folk tales, myths, and fables. The older and more obscure, the better. The spider webs were everywhere. The strings reached out to me all day, every day. I needed to find out who or what was pulling them. I needed to not be so alone. Puppet or prey, I would follow the tug all the more blindly now, all the while praying I found this cathedral of a woman who disappeared into the night. Thank you for listening to Pulling Strings, An original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. That does it for Prose this week. I hope you enjoyed all the stories. All the music you heard comes from YouTube's free music library, and it's all being used under CC 01.0 public domain dedication licenses. I hope you'll join us for our next regular episode in 2 weeks' time. But please do refresh your feeds in the coming week because we'll have a Mother's Day special coming up as well. Until we're together again, and always, I do hope you'll love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is, stranger than fiction. Thank you so much for listening.